Hello, everybody. This is Nirali Shah. How are you all? And I welcome you to episode 4 of Reintroducing Buddha and the Buddha Stories with Nirali Shah. And you're going to see me in a minute. I hope you have watched my past few episodes and I hope you loved what I've shared. Or the new perspective that I'm talking about sometimes somehow connects with what you have learned so far, connects with your heart. So we're soon going to go into this lovely world of kapilavastu, some 2,500 years in the past, and find out what happened in the inner quest of Siddhartha to find the way beyond suffering for himself and everybody. Hope you're able to hear me and I'm audible to you. And I would say hi. Good evening, everyone. This is Nirali Shah, and I welcome you to episode 4 of Re-Sharing and Reintroducing Stories of Buddha from a new perspective once again. So in the last session, we kind of stopped at the part where Buddha has seen these 4 signs which came to him as a divine intervention, calling him to take the next step towards his calling, towards his purpose, for the reason he had incarnated on the earth. So, I shared a beautiful quote in the last session. I would like to start with that quote, which is, there are only 2 mistakes one can make along the road to truth: not going all the way or not starting at all. So, well, after returning and seeing these 4 signs, after returning home back to his palace, Buddha's uh, inner world is shattered, his foundation is shattered, everything that he's learned about, everything, his education, everything his father taught, everything about being a king, everything about knowing, the king's place in the world. Uh, and the power he has over people, all of those belief systems were kind of crashed just with this 4 signs. Now I want to give you a very less known but interesting fact, and that is every Buddha of the past and the future, all Buddhas somewhere receive these 4 signs, this exact 4 signs. This is how many sermons of Buddha or the stories of Buddha kind of talks about when in many Buddhist scriptures, that Buddha receives these 4 signs which kind of wakes them up to move to to the task as in search of uh, the truth beyond the suffering, beyond the ultimate sufferings of the world. So that happens to Siddharth also. And he comes back, and with this, earth shattering experience, definitely he has many questions. Now he's definitely by birth a very curious child, and this part of the world he had never experienced, so his mind, his um, his subconscious is filled with everything that he sees, with a lot of questions of, is this permanent, or is this um, temporary? Is this going to give me ultimate happiness? Is this also going to age? Will this person age to for whom I care so much about? Will um, will this palace remain in the same state as what I see right now? And then he sees so many things aging, which he hadn't noticed in his entire lifespan so far. um, that things are getting old. It requires restructuring, it requires changing, it requires refurbishing, it requires redecorating. So things are changing, things requires upgradation. And he also realized with all that he too required upgradation of information and what he knew about life. And so he started asking questions to all the wise people in his palace. He started discussing with Yashodhara, started discussing with his father, and started asking questions which nobody had heard before and nobody had expected. The depth of these questions, the vastness of this question was beyond the minds of people around him. So somewhere Buddha began to realize that they cannot suffice my thirst, they cannot suffice what I'm looking for, and they don't really know everything about life. So far, that's what he understood, that his this is his life. So well, um, he went to his father and asked him that he would like to go in search of these questions, in search of the answers of these questions. And obviously his father was not very happy, and he said, like, you know you will never grow old, you will never die, you will never be sick, I'll make sure of that. And Siddhartha asked him back, okay, but would you promise me that you will not grow old, you will not die, and you will not be sick? And he didn't have a response to that. So now Siddhartha knew that it's my responsibility to find what they don't know. And also finding in a way, even if I don't have a validation, I don't have a consent from my loved ones, because he realized at some point that even they have a certain limitation. And my thirst is way bigger than what they seek in life, and they are very happy and satisfied because they have what they desire in life, but I don't. My quest is somewhere out there, something out there is calling me, and I need to go. And so it's like, I'm sure many days must have gone by, looking for this, settling his life around what he requires to choose for his future. And in the meanwhile, they say his son was born. On the other side, while Buddha, or Siddharth rather, is settling his life on how he's going to go for in the search of his questions, um, Sudhodana is planning his planning to make him the monarch he could be. He's planning to give him his throne, and Siddharth is not aware of it. And he ultimately comes to realize that I will need to leave quietly in the middle of the night while everyone's asleep, because they will not be able to let me go, because obviously they love me and they are attached with me dearly, and I cannot stay. I'm not happy, in this. I feel caged, and there is something out there calling me. So I need to go find it while they're asleep. So um, one night when everyone's asleep, which was also the night when you know it's like, as I said earlier, that they make choices based on some inspiration and some calling that they get. So that night was most favorable for him to take his action, and so he suddenly decides to leave. And he was new to the world, so he decides to take Channa with him and his favorite horse. Now, as he steps out, uh, also when a person is waking up, there are certain energies on the earth who try to kind of to which in our version we call it, in Hinduism we call it a Maya Jal. So these energies that try to keep things under this elusive net. So if anybody is trying to step outside that net, they definitely make great efforts to keep them inside. And so while he was taking the steps to break this Maya Jal, and so obviously these energies showed up in front of him in the form of thoughts and emotions, telling him, you're not doing the right thing. You don't care for your family. uh, uh, what if you don't find what you're looking for, and then ultimately in few years you realize that you what all the decisions that you made were all in vain, and you just gave pain to your loved ones. And do you know that in few days you're going to be the king of Kapilavastu? And would you let go of that power and that authority just for these mere few questions? And while these came in front of Siddharth's mind, in the form of doubt, insecurity, in the form of greed, and in the form of attachment, in the form of trying to keep him stuck to this lifestyle, uh, and not break free from this elusive uh, reality. He started counter questioning each of these limited thoughts. He said, is it going to be permanent? Is it like, would my wife be as young as what she is today? And would she give me the same level of happiness even in the few years after marriage? Will me being king would really give me more joy and more freedom, or will it tie me more with more responsibilities and hardship, and more pain of how to run the country? And when that debate was done, ultimately Siddharth and his quest and his the seeker within him, won the conflict. And finally he steps out with Channa on his horse. And this is a place, and also I would like to add that uh, we feel, when you're moving into the forest, or you're renouncing the family life or the world, um, you uh, like you're letting this go so that you can achieve something. um, but actually, obviously, in those times people used to move to the forest and finance, or move to the mountains and finance, and look for go within and meditate. But it is not just about that. It's about having courage to um, move into the unknown, because you don't know where you're going. The only thing you know is what you see is true for you. And um, Despite all the doubts and fear and insecurity, your thirst to seek that truth is bigger, and that's what drives you. It's not um, a destination, it's an exploration. And Buddha was exactly there. So he didn't know where he was going. So he just kept going until three of them met a river, and that's where uh, his heart says, or the intuition or the calling said that this is where he says goodbye to all these to Channa, to his horse, and he needs to go alone. So this is where there's a very beautiful incident. He changes his princely attire. He asks the boatman to give him his clothing in exchange of his princely attire. So he's all dressed in the simple clothing, and he sits on a rock, and he also tests himself, and he asks the nature by cutting a part of his hair, and he says, well, if I'm going to succeed in what I'm looking for, then may the wind carry it, and do not, and not allow it to touch the ground. But if at all I'm to fail, then maybe it's time for me to return back. So, and then in that case, may it touch the ground. And then he let go of that, that string of hair from his hands. And obviously, it didn't touch the ground, it flew away in the wind. And so that was a clear sign. So it wasn't a decision coming from an ego, but it was a decision where he was, taking permission from all elements, that, if I'm true, if this is my true inner calling, then, show me that I'm true, and show me that you're going to support me. And he receives that support, he receives that sign. So, this journey is all about reading the signs and moving forward. um, and even if it is like, the most it feels like the most complex or tough decision, or an unknown zone, even then, somewhere, that you will be supported in the most magical, miraculous way. And with that, he asked Channa that, now please go back to the palace and tell my dad that once I've found what I'm looking for, I'll return to Kapilavastu once. Tell my wife that I will return to her once after what I've found. And obviously, Channa wasn't happy. They were like, great companions. But also his horse. Now, somewhere I've learned that, horses are a very conscious creature, and just like dogs, they have a very deep connection with the humankind, and they have a sense of wisdom which, they sometimes love to transfer to their masters. So this horse was obviously, it was Siddhartha's horse. So obviously, he had a certain uh, you know frequency and certain development, basically, to be next to him. So the horse now knew that he will no more be able to serve Siddharth in the way he would like. And so he chooses to leave his body right at the bank of that river, which is, I think, River Ganga. And he leaves for the spirit world, from where he chose to support Siddhartha on his quest. And so Siddhartha crosses the river, Shanna returns back, I believe. And this is where his journey begins. So, he's moving forest after forest and village after village. He obviously, he's not served on his palate, so he has to go to a village and ask for food. And in those interactions, it so happens that his journey itself shows that how he becomes popular wherever he goes. His aura, the way he talked, the conversations that he had with people, kind of woke something in those people, even though they were unaware of what he's going to become in the future. This people kind of, loved him for who he was and what he's after. So he met different stages of different people, and there were so many he meets on the way who felt that, if he finds it, whenever he finds it in the future, we will go to him and get that, the truth that he is looking for. So they wait for him to find it, and the blessed uh, Siddhartha to find what he's seeking. On the way, he also meets King Bimbisar, who is King Ashoka's grandfather, and he was impressed just by his aura, and they had a conversation, a very wise conversation, and the King Bimbisar decides to test Siddharth for if he's really the prince who let go of his throne and is in search of this is a time when there are no mobile phones and there are no Facebook, that if you look for that person you find them in it, and that there's no news tabloid that talks about that the king Siddhartha, or sorry, Prince Siddhartha left the palace in search of such and such questions about life and suffering. So if somebody says, either you believe it or you kind of try and test them. So that's what he does. So he says, okay, you know if at all that is true for him, then let me test him. And so he said, he offered his own kingdom to him. He said, I really appreciate what you're doing and all of that, and the kind of wisdom that you have, I believe I would like to you to rule my kingdom, and you do it very, very well. And this is where Siddhartha refuses once again, because of course he never wanted to be tied to that status, and he wasn't in anywhere in attachment of that status. So he says, well, that's not for me, I left that already, and I'm not going to go into that trap once again. So I'm on my path, I'm on my journey to seek what I'm here to seek. And that impressed Bimbisar, and he too, deep in his heart, decided that when he finds what he finds, I'm going to follow him. I'm going to learn that from him. And well, so that is how this great incident, which is well noted in the stories of Buddha and Buddhist scriptures very well. And then uh, he meets on his entire way to exploration of what he was seeking. Uh, he tries and experiments on various paths that were known to men at that time, that showed them, freedom from suffering. And there are so many paths. Even we know that there are so many paths to, find peace, to meditate, to attain a certain level of skills, to attain some level of, like, healing, and all of that. So there are many ways to go to that same place. um, so he started learning from one ashram to another, uh, and wherever he went, obviously he would succeed. He would immediately grasp the ways and methods. He would move forward fast, progress really, really fast. And uh, the main rishi, or the teacher of that like ashram, would definitely ask him to run his ashram and his followers, because he would see that he has all the qualities to lead his followers after he leaves this body. So they wanted Siddharth to run his their organizations, basically. Now, um, so so many stages, like he leaving the kingdom and letting go of his post as king, and then letting go of another offer from King Bimbisar, not choosing to stay at any of the village where people loved him and adored him, and even asked that they can serve him right here in the village. to reaching to these ashrams and practicing, learning things. But again, when he was offered a post, all of this he had already done in his past. So this wasn't something that um, he was really stopping at. It couldn't stop him, because he knew that this is all something that he has done. He's looking for something more, and there is no way stopping for a small thing like a post and running some followers and taking care of them and this organization. So until he hasn't found, there is no stopping for him. So he tries one method after the other, and somewhere still he knows that this is not uh, he's definitely progressing, he's definitely learning more, but this is not it. There is something more than this. So after having learned from various teachers and having learned many methods and modalities that said that this takes you to the ultimate freedom or the permanent happiness, um, he knew that he wasn't going there. So he needed to take matters in his own hands, and he needed to try something on his own. So ultimately, and then, in the meanwhile, there's some people who really kind of uh, get the idea that this guy, and by this time he had come to be recognized as Gautama, which is his picture life basically. So they decide to follow him, that we'll take care of you, and you find what you find, and when you find it, you can give it to us. So somewhere they knew that he will find it someday. And one of the known practices of that time was to attain moksha, nirvana, or freedom through pain. So you put yourself into immense pain and hardship, bodily hardship, and then, because you're letting go of all the attachments, even with the body, is where you achieve the greater knowledge. So he said, okay, fine, let me try this on my own. And he sat under a tree, and he started penance, meditating, going within, with the intention that, if I give myself this level of hardship, if I torture my body, if I, put my body to pain, is where I will attain that. And that didn't work for him. So he went to the next method, and the next method, and the next method. And by the time, when he tried all these methods, uh, one thing, while experimenting through all of that, one thing he came to realize is that, um, you know, that may be the way for some, but that may not be the way right now. In this moment, and for me, this is not working. So I require to find something that works for me and that works for many, uh, for whom these ways doesn't work. And so while he's coming to this conclusion, on the outside, his body is really becoming very weak. His muscles or his skin is touching his bones. It's become very thin, and in that, all of that, with hunger and tiredness and a lot of torture on his body. And I'm using the word torture, but it's more like, adding, some sort of a hardship with your body. He finds himself, uh, you know, feeling weak in his mind and in his intention also. He realized that he, with this weak mind and weak body, he is going nowhere. So he requires something else, and for that, he also requires to nourish his body, by uh, uh, you know taking body through this pain is not the way. And while he's, his inner world is, coming to this observation and coming to this awareness, there are beings who are obviously supporting him from the spirit world, seeing that, how do we help him, kind of share some signs with him once again. And that, that science from the nature kind of strikes in his world, and he realizes that he needs to come to a middle path. which is not about renouncing and letting go and painting, but which is more called a madhyam marg, or a middle way, the way that may be uh, uh, an, a way where people can go with more ease on their quest to be free from the sufferings of the world. So it's like not cutting suffering through suffering, but using a middle way to move to the life beyond suffering. So this is where he arrives. um, Now we're going to move to the next part of what happens hence, after this conclusion that he receives, after so much of meditation and so much of inner work. Where does he go? And I mean, we all know that ultimately he attains the Buddhahood, but what happens is something that we are going to learn tomorrow in the episode 5, which is also the last episode that I'm going to be doing, because on 16th is the day of Buddha Purnima. And at 9 p.m., we have this very powerful meditation. Um, and this is the day when we're actually going to connect to that ultimate energy he attained after all of this learning and after all of this experience on his own. So if you feel like go to the event, and you can register yourself for this meditation, come experience the connection with Buddha. And I will see you tomorrow at 9 p.m. with the last episode of uh, reintroducing you all to Buddha and Buddha stories with Niralisha. And before I wind up, I would like to end with a beautiful quote, which is, pain is certain, but suffering is optional, is what Buddha said. And that's exactly where he is going tomorrow in episode 5. So, well, see you and take care. Bye bye.